Please state your name and occupation.
My name is Shanika Stanley. I am a human resources consultant. My formal title is Senior HR Consultant Team Lead.
Shanika, briefly explain your expectations in elementary school and the community where you grew up. What were the expectations for you to attend school and the community you grew up?
Well, the expectation from my parents was to always do my best, aim high. I was a bit of an overachiever. Like, I was one of the kids that always finished my work first, and my mother used to always make sure I was being thorough because she thought, why are you finishing your work so much quickly than everybody, so much quicker than everyone else? And I think I was just pretty sharp, particularly at an early age. The elementary school I attended at the very beginning of my career for kindergarten, well, not my career, but my school career, I guess you can say, for kindergarten and first grade wasn't quite challenging enough for me. And we learned that just from seeing how quickly I would get done with work and that my work was done correctly. So from there, I transferred schools where I was able to thrive in an environment that was just more challenging for me. So I think that was the message, is just to always do my best. And when I didn't do my best, what were the consequences? Always be aware of what the consequences were of not doing my best, whether that was academically, whether that was behaviorally. I was the kid that always got she talks too much in class, but that's because I was always done first. So I needed something else to do, right? So I think that's pretty much how I was raised by my family. And when I think about community expectations, I mean, I think everybody, all the kids on my block kind of had the same expectations. All of us had two-parent homes. Our parents worked. We were all latchkey kids, so the expectation was to go to school, come home, do what you're told. And that's what the majority of me and my friends did.
As a teen, speaking of your friends, what were your sources of independence as a teen? You mentioned being a latchkey kid,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good thing in many respects. But what were some of your sources of independence when you were able to do things on your own without your parents?
I was. My parents were pretty trusting of me. My best friend who lived next door to me was 2 years older than I was. And so we used to travel a lot, like, this was the 80s, I guess a big difference between now and then. But we would get on the bus and go wherever we wanted to go, whether that was Ford City Mall, that was straight up the Jeffrey bus to 79th Street and 79th, all the way from the east side, all the way to the west. Or whether it was taking the Jeffrey bus all the way downtown, or many times Evergreen Plaza was our hangout, and that was two buses, the 93rd East and the 95th West. And there were no cell phones. When I left, my mother and my father knew where I was going. I'd ask mom for permission. I'd ask dad for a couple of dollars, and the expectation was be home before dark. So whether that was 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, depending on what the season was, that was it. That was the expectation. And if I was going to be out longer, I had to find a payphone and a quarter and call them and say, hey, here's what's going on. I'll be home at such and such time. And there was no, you're not home at the time you said you were going to be home, or you didn't call. That just didn't exist, because that wasn't the expectation. So I knew that if I didn't do those things, my privileges would be taken away. So yeah, I would say I had a pretty independent life, even as a young teen. Like, we were doing that when I was 10, just getting on the bus and going places, 10, 11 years old. And I think that wasn't abnormal in the 80s. I mean, that's just kind of what we did.
So, with having that independence, but also having that structure, were there friends that you realized you had to sort of distance yourself from because of those, because of their structure, because of those consequences that you didn't not want to face?
I would say I didn't have friends I ever had to distance myself from, but there were definitely activities I would distance myself from. Like, I had friends there were only certain places I could go. And again, there was no cell phone, there was no tracking. But when my mother said to me, if I said to my mother, okay, I'm walking up to 95th Street to go to McDonald's, we lived on 91st, so 95th was a 4-block walk. She knew, okay, how long that would take me to get there, what I said I was doing, I'm turning around and coming back. It wasn't a pit stop to 5 different places like maybe some of my friends would want to do if they decided to come along with me and they say, ooh, let's go here too. My response was, nope. I told my mother, here's where I was going, and I'm going to be back at this time, and that's what I did. So I never really had to distance myself from people, because I would say I didn't have people in my life that were doing things, I would say, like, I didn't have anybody that at our age was like drinking or cutting school. Like they weren't, well, I would say, yeah, definitely cutting school, cutting class every now and again. But it was never serious enough to where they were like joining gangs. Or I just didn't have friends that did those kind of things. Now, did they cut class? Sure, but I didn't cut class. I knew what the consequence would be for me if I did that. So, yeah, I mean, so I would say definitely not. I didn't have to distance myself from people, but definitely had to distance myself from activities.
When you decided to attend college, what was your draw to attend college? And where did you attend college, by the way?
So I attended the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, HBCU located in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Um, Honestly, college was never a discussion. It was just an expectation. Like, my mother went to college and, my cousins went, all my friends were going. Like, it wasn't a thing where it was an either or. Like, I just knew I was going to college. The question was where I was going to go to college. My mother took me, so my family is from Arkansas. My maternal side of the family is from Arkansas. So at least once or twice a year, I would spend time in West Helena, which is where my family is from, Lakeview. We would visit Pine Bluff as I got older because I had cousins who were in college in Pine Bluff. She took me there, I believe I was a sophomore in high school. And I just had the most fun touring the campus, the dorms, talking to people, meeting people. I was like, oh, I think this going to be it. Like, it's far enough away from my parents because I was at the point in life where, what do they say? You smelling yourself? Like, my mother worked my nerves. She died. She didn't want me to do nothing. I didn't feel like being bothered. So it was like, all right, this is far enough away from her where we could get along better because we're not in each other's face. But I wouldn't be all alone because I had family there. And then turns out I had a couple of classmates from high school that went there too. So yeah, so that was the major reason I made that choice. And also part of my thought process is I wanted to go to a historically Black college. Like, I feel like I knew even at that point in life that being around Black people, I would be celebrated. And I see people say, I've seen a saying before, like, go somewhere where you're celebrated, not just tolerated. And that was really, a good impetus for me. I looked at Howard University. I looked at University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. I looked at a few local colleges in Illinois too. But ultimately, I ended up choosing the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, mainly, again, because of my family connections. They had the major I wanted, and I felt like it was the best fit, and I still do.
What do you do for a living now?
I am a human resources consultant. I work for a firm that is based out of Washington, D.C. We have almost 100 employees at this point. When I started working there in 2012, when I started working there in 2012, it was less than 20 of us. And now, 9 years later, we're at almost 100 employees. So we're based out of Washington, D.C. with consultants and staff all over the country, supporting nonprofits, helping them with their human resources needs.
What would you tell a student who's interested in human resources in their senior year of high school? In senior year of high school, what would you tell them? What should they study in college?
Well, I would definitely tell them to study human resources, but also if they're at a college that doesn't have that, like if there's some sort of human behavior class, business would be a good major as well, because that's what human resources is. Human resources is a delicate balance between supporting the staff and making sure they have what they need to be successful, but then also protecting the interest of the organization in which you work for. So that's making sure they're following laws, they're following policies and procedures, but also that your staff is happy and that they're supported and they can do good work. I'm definitely of the mindset that nobody applies for a job, starts a job, goes to work every day and says, you know what, I'm gonna suck at this and I'm gonna make people mad and I'm gonna be terrible, right? So part of our job as human resources professionals is to really dig into that and figure out, and that's why I said human behavior, that type of track would be good too, because you need to learn what makes people tick, right? Like what keeps them engaged, what keeps them excited, what keeps them motivated. And that's different for every person. So really being able to train and teach, the staff and the managers on how to manage their staff. And again, working with the leaders in the organization on how to best protect the organization. So it's fun. I would definitely say if you like people, it's a great career.